what? It's Wednesday, and you know what that means? Yes, it's time for Mr. Nailsin's Wednesday Comics, and really, just gonna talk about one. Boy, my schedule is stacked with stuff to do, and last week was worse because I was a bit under the weather. Yeah, that happens. I'm diabetic, and oh boy. All kinds of stuff can creep up. But feeling better now. It's just my sleep schedule is all screwed up. So I don't know if I'm coming or going sometimes. But anyway, so found time to get through my stack of comic books, or graphic novels rather, that these are independent comics that I backed on Indiegogo. And the one I want to talk about is the latest Jawbreakers. This is Richard C. Meyer's outfit of Splato Comics, and if you followed his videos, you understand the story behind that. This is the latest one that he did, which is a bit of a prequel. It goes back because he killed off some characters, so you kind of had to do that if you want him to show up again. And you get how it all began, more or less. This is more of a Silkworm story, but the other guys show up. And Grand Bazaar refers to an actual bazaar. That's a pan-dimensional bazaar where you can go and make deals, but be careful, you lose your immortal soul and all that. And it's sort of an in-between story type deal. It's introducing characters as origin stories go. I mean, there it is, but I mean, it's not in total. You don't really know Silkworm's total past. He's supposed to have been, I think they were all supposed to have been superheroes in the past, but they became these mercenaries and whatnot, and so that sort of thing. And then there's a supernatural element here. And so it's kind of a setup for other stories, obviously. I think there's a character introduced, this, I suppose she's supposed to be some sort of demonic goddess or whatever, but she's quite smitten with Hell Priest, so I guess that's appropriate. So perhaps that'll lead on to his other story. I know Knife Hand, I'm looking forward to that one, is getting his own story, so I'm assuming each one will probably get theirs, and maybe it'll go more into depth. But that's kind of how this one works. It's that it's sort of this tour of these characters and expanding on possibilities for it, but never quite really getting to it. And once again, with Jawbreakers books, the backup stories I always find to be more entertaining. I enjoy them more than the main feature. Lost Souls was still, to my opinion, the best of the batch of these. The artwork is excellent. It's really good in both stories, and there's another backup. So the Nexus returns again here, and I wasn't really into Nexus back. I knew of him, and I would see him in advertisements and stuff. And when it came to First Comics, I think they published him for a while. I was mostly into American Flag at the time, and so I don't really think I ever read a Nexus story in those days, so I didn't know. He's kind of brutal in this story. It's quick, short, and sweet. Well, maybe not so sweet, but again, the artwork is outstanding. And but yeah, the second story, both stories with the supernatural element in the first story with Grand Bazaar, it's still more of a comical story in a way. And Silkworm is, and more so, I think, in this one, unless my memory is failing me, which is likely as I'm old. And but I think he's trying to put him, he's sort of like, he's the asshole character, but he's still the good guy. And interesting thing of bringing up American Flag, Howard Chaykin was a grand master at writing his heroes, his leading men as assholes, but still was basically the honorable, or did the right thing. Maybe not so much honor here and there, but nevertheless, they would ultimately be the hero you get. And I'm sure that owes a lot to Howard Chaykin's personality. He's a very angry man, but he was very good at crafting these a-hole characters. He did a Green Lantern series on Guy Gardner and just completely nailed it. It's a rather simple story, but still I mean, DC Comics would probably just give Chaykin Guy Gardner and let him do a Guy Gardner series. But that would make too much sense, so we'll never see that happen. But anyway, but yeah, I think that's kind of the idea for Silkworm. Doesn't quite deliver on the level of Chaykin, but it's not a bad idea to deal with, especially since they're in this rotten business of their mercenary work. And of course, coming out of the Expendables book that he did, of course, Expendables and Jawbreakers. Well, Jawbreakers is Expendables with superpowers. So they, maybe like years later, they unite the different guys who played superheroes in this superhero movie era, but they're all mercenaries in the future. So I don't know. I guess they'd have Chris Evans and Henry Cavill on a team or something. Something like that. Anyway, so yeah, there's strong points in it, but the objective honesty here, I don't think it quite delivered in total. But it's not like, oh boy, I blew my money on this. I don't think that. Of course, the artwork seals the deal, and once again, it opens possibilities, I'm sure, for later. And I'm reminded, I've said this before on the previous books and whatnot, I think had this been able to run as a normal comic book series, it would probably flow a lot better. But that's, this is the way it is, and I guess that's how he's compartmentalizing his stories and then delivering them in this manner. So the second one was much better. It is more, there's a horror element to it. And once again, the artwork is very good, and it's more appropriate in this sort of weird another supernatural element to it, and sort of this local folklore type stuff that they have to face off against, and very well done in the creepiness of it and the final outcome. So it's a solid run, and some cool stuff there. And leaves you saying, well, there's another one on the way. So, and we'll have to see where that goes. Again, as Indiegogo projects go, see, get that? They, I guess, check out eBay for the possibility of picking these up, or keep your eye peeled if you don't have any of these for upcoming projects for backing, because some of these will be bundles will be offered, and you can pick up books you didn't get before. So there's quite a few. I have not read all of his works. I keep thinking I'm going to pick up Iron Sights, but I never have gotten to it. Right now, I think his Ballad of No is his absolute best work. That thing blew me away. I think it's brilliant, and interestingly enough, it's very minimalistic and simple in style and approach, and yet it's very captivating. And the Pandemic comic book, which is a good one, it's a good run. It fits in with that whole storyline, so it'll be fascinating to see where that goes. But that took me by surprise. I was really impressed with that one. But as far as Jawbreakers go, I still say Lost Souls for the win. And then the backup stories are probably, I find them to be more entertaining than the main feature in these later books. So, but these things can change down the road. The final story, well, oh boy, this is not a happy one. Now, I've talked about Erik Larsen in earlier Nailsin ratings videos and whatnot, and I was a big fan of Erik Larsen. I loved his art style, his sense of humor, and I really, really enjoyed Savage Dragon for years. Collected that book. There was all kinds of hilarious stuff in there, and just clever stuff and things that he would do, and certainly expanding on comic book history, and certainly homages to previous stories of Superman and the Fantastic Four and stuff like that, but in a very his own take on it, and weaved it in with his Savage Dragon narrative. His politics were always hard left, and now they're so left, he's fallen off the planet. But that being said, that is not the reason I stopped reading his books. His books got very disturbing with well, young girls. I'll just put it at that. I never had a problem with the sexy women that he always had in his comic books, but those were grown-ass women. So the depictions later I found far too troubling and disturbing, and that was enough of that stuff. Well, since then, I haven't heard anything good about the guy. Of course, his politics being what they are is what they are. He has every right to that. But, well, there's still plenty of stuff to be disturbed about. And it's just one of these things, God, why are you this stupid? Just lacking in any attempt at the slightest critical thought. So, of course, the FBI raid, it was always called a raid. Now, suddenly it's not, apparently. It's that stupid. But on Donald Trump's residence in Mar-a-Lago. So, you had all that, and that was in the news. So, Erik Larson decided to weigh in on this and said, Donald Trump being executed for treason on the White House lawn is the closure America needs to start the healing process. Yeah. So see, this is how he presents himself as the sane and rational one. You know, what did Donald Trump ever do to him? Nothing. He had nasty tweets. Not like this, he didn't. Now, they would say, oh, isn't this threatening the president or what? Well, he's a former president. But certainly, yes, it is a crime to threaten him, even if you're just joking and don't mean it. You would be investigated by the Secret Service and all that. But in this case, he's presenting this fantasy where he would be executed for treason. So this means that a trial would have happened already and this sort of thing. So I suppose in that aspect. And, he's not president at the moment. So you can add that. So he continues on, wondering if Trump stealing classified documents about nuclear weapons is at last the tipping point where the GOP finally tries and distance themselves from the guy, or if they'll attempt to paint that as totally cool. Which again displays his enormous ignorance. I can't believe, well, I guess I can now because the weird era we live in, that anyone fell for this ridiculous notion about the nuclear codes and whatnot. Do you know anything about this? This stuff's in the news all the time about how the codes are handled. He's a former president. You understand that? Now, surprise, it wasn't true. That was just Washington Post with their source ran with that. Obviously, the idea of vetting stories and having at least two sources to confirm, to run with it. Just hasn't applied for years now. But it fuels a narrative that people like Mr. Larson wants to believe. So tell him what he wants to hear, and then he's happy about it, and that's all you need to do. It's very easy to manipulate, really. But that's not how that works with nuclear weapons. As far as the GOP distancing themselves, you haven't been paying attention. You really haven't. So finally, he says hashtag treason, and this is spelled with a 45 in place of the A and S. Get it? Is trending on Twitter as hashtags go. That's a pretty solid one. No. Does he list anything? Does he know anything? No, he's already proven his ignorance twice, and it wouldn't do any good to point it out to him because he wouldn't. If he's buying this, he wouldn't even be able to comprehend what anyone's talking about. I've always said that Trump's an asshole, but he was not the villain. By now, you know who the villains are after what we've been through. And so it's just sad to see that sort of thing. But even all this, Trump being executed is probably pushing it. But even all of this is nowhere near as disturbing as the stuff he put in his comic books before I quit it altogether. I don't know what that's about, and I don't care to pursue the matter further. But something happened to the guy, and it's sad. So, but he was a great talent, and it's all wasted. That's too bad. So anyway, there you go. That's a terrible way to end this episode. Hopefully, happier comic books. Well, the comic book was fine. That part was great. This story was not. So apologies for that. Next week on Mr. Nailsin's Wednesday Comics, we'll talk about some other comic book related entertainment.